Hey guys, well here we are again, another weekend out in the barn. It's Friday right now, and let me show you what I've got on tap for this weekend. First off, I'll show you, I just spent an hour or so getting my new to me compressor wired up the way I want it. I wired it to a switch, I already had my 30 amp 240 volt breaker over there. I had it on an outlet before. It's a pain in the butt, especially something like this that's more hardwired, so I didn't want a big disconnect box, so I got me a double pole. It's got enough pressure right now, so my filter's acting up. And I wanted also to put a valve in here. I like having a ball valve, isolate from all these little leaks, and I bought the wrong damn size, so I'll have to get myself a 3/8 instead of a 1/2 inch. That way we can valve that off when we're not using it, and we'll be able to leave all of our lines hooked up. At any rate, you're not here to talk about air compressors. So, first thing we procured today is a new Welding male side of my slip yoke. So, that's the exact right one. Wasn't even all that expensive. I also, while I was at it, spent a few bucks on, this is the old dust boot thread-on weep seal, so we'll give us a new one of those for a couple bucks. There's no reason to put something like that on, and it is deformed a little bit anyway. So right now I'm going to test fit this and kind of reassemble with the slip yoke. I know I've already cut it back, not much, maybe a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to test fit it before I go cutting, and then I'll get the, I cut this with the cutoff wheel. It's close, but I want to get it closer, so I'll probably get the what do you call it? The that thing over there. I don't know why. Chop saw. Thank you, Rob's brain. Anyway, we'll get chop saw probably and make a nice clean cut. Then we can bevel it back, grind it back, weld it in, and we'll be on our way. Then we can put this drive shaft back in and commence to airlines. The airlines for the brakes, as I think I've said before, should be fairly straightforward. All we're gonna have to do is maybe cut some lines back actually and get rid of a lot of the stuff that's on the Peterbilt axle. And then over here, that's where all the dollars are at, boys. We got some 3/8 airline, we got some 1/8 inch airline, a lot more than we need. We got a whole bunch of fittings. We got our air gauges, we got our valves, which this is just enough. This is just the valves to do the rear. That's the only thing. I did not buy the front valves yet. I do have enough fittings. That should be all the fittings that I need for the front though, and all the line. Got me some new tubing cutters. And while we got the dash apart, we'll obviously mount the switches, wire them up, get the air gauges in, and I'll probably put this little boost gauge in too. Had this sitting around at work, so we might as well. We got an empty gauge port, so we'll put that in. So I was able to order all that good stuff from my local auto parts store. They give me this TechTran book, so I can just make my list, at home and get what I need. So I was going to show you this too. This is my furnace filter, guys. So when you have a forced air furnace, this is why I would not recommend. I mean, I'm not complaining. My old garage in my old house did not have I kind of had a wood stove, which is really way too dangerous for a automotive shop. But I'm not going to complain about having forced air. This furnace is awesome. It does the job. It's actually relatively efficient on propane too. But when you're cutting and grinding and welding and painting, this happens. So if you can see up there, I buy filters by the case. And lately I've been going through one a weekend. So that tells you how much debris is in the air. But I guess the furnace is doing a good job of filtering that out, so I'm not breathing it though, right? All right, well, that being said, get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. I am gonna get started on doing some measuring here and test fitting, and we'll get this drive shaft put back together the way it needs to be and get it installed. And that might be all I do today. We might start monkeying with at least pulling off some airlines. We'll see what happens. But I've got the hang tight. stub shaft pressed into the drive shaft. I cleaned up obviously on the tube, beveled it out. I test fit this first into the female half of the slip yoke, and then put the drive shaft into the axle, held everything up. This cut I had already made, so I removed the weld, and then I removed that much, about 1.5 inches. That's perfect. It's going to allow it to be decompressed by about 1/2 inch to 1 inch at installation and at full rest like this. I'm leaving it right where it's at. So I just cleaned up that tube. My version of pressing this in was to tap with the drive shaft standing on the floor, to tap with a hammer all the way around, back and forth, to press this into the shaft. It is a very tight fit. And then I took a level down the length of the tube with a pair of calipers at the end, and I checked, you know, 2 axes, 4 points over and over, and just kept tapping. I mean, generally that sleeve evens everything up anyway, but there was a little bit of movement when I played with it. Is it absolutely perfect? No, but it's within probably a 64th at worst. I think we're pretty good. So we're gonna weld this thing in, see what happens. There we go. Not too shabby. Actually looks worse now that I took the flap wheel to it. But anyway, there we go. That's how you weld the drive shaft, apparently. Let's put this dang thing together. Alright guys, well, the drive shaft's in. What I started to show you there, we got our drive lines all greased, painted up to bare metal. She looking good. I went to drain rear end, and I kind of suspected this, to be honest with you, because when I went to move it manually, it didn't want to roll, right? I kind of had to break it free, and I suspected that there was ice in it. Well, there was. I got some water out when I first started draining, and then I got gear lube, and I just sat there for probably 10-15 minutes with my torch, my map gas torch, and heated. And I can't feel ice when I stick my finger in the hole anymore, and I can't see any when I look through the fill port, but there's probably still some in there, and I don't want water, so I decided I'd rig up a chicken water heater thing and put the floor jack underneath it, put some tension on it, and we're just gonna leave this on all night. That'll heat up the whole casing of that axle and hopefully melt off any little bit of ice is left. So we'll just let that sit. Always something, right? So tomorrow morning, that means I can jump right into hopefully putting some fluid in this thing, and then we'll get all these old air lines cut off of the Pete. I call it the Pete, it's now Ford, but get all these old air lines cut off of here, all this stuff, 'cause that's all junk. We'll get this stuff swung back up into place and shortened and done what we need to do, and then I want to get the braking system all in place, and then we'll do the start plumbing the bags. And I'd love to have the airline stuff done by the end of the day, and should be essentially ready to probably throw some tires back on and take for a spin. Then we can get this axle out of here and get Nancy in to put her proper headlights on. So, fun stuff. We want to make some stew, have some drinks. All right, guys. Well, I've been back out here for, I don't know, a couple hours, 2-3 hours. I don't know. My chicken water idea worked better than I had hoped, I guess. When I came out this morning, I came out to a whole bunch of gear lube and water everywhere. So I threw down some, well, actually not some, a whole lot of oil dry. And yeah, everything's thawed now. The furnace has been on for a while. So at any rate, that's done. Got all the air lines cut off, as you can see. I just stuck my blowgun into each one of these lines on the existing bags. Those are good bags. I mean, they're weather checked. They're still going to get replaced, but they're holding air. So what that means is I don't have to take them off and replace them right now. I can just leave them on. They'll be great to be on there for when we have this sandblasted, and then I don't have to worry about them. And then after blasting and paint, I can just change the bags out. Same with the shocks. We'll do the same thing. I am a little sad, though. It's not the end of the world. It's just more work. I should be used to that by now. But I got this all in, and I started working on airlines. You know, got fluid filled back up. You know, all about 6 gallons is what it took of gear lube. And I was over here working on airlines, and I looked down. I had a puddle right where that drain pan is. And long story short, this axle's cracked. I know. Bummer. What it is it's hard to see. I'm going to grab a flashlight. Show you what we're dealing with here. So right in there, along the bottom of, this is the plate right there. This, the mounting plate for the air leaf setup. And right at the very bottom of that plate, where it contacts the axle's cracked. It's about the width of that plate, which is about the width of the spring. So it's, 3 or 4 inch crack. When I lay underneath, I can see it. And it's probably just from tension at that point. Over the years, now that I look at it, the axle's wet, especially on this side. That explains 2 things. 1, it explains why the axle's wet. 2, it explains why there was a whole bunch of water in that diff. Oh, and by the way, just in case you guys are wondering, want to yell at me, I did, after I drained everything out this morning, I put about 2 gallons of diesel in with the plug still in, and let that diesel at least a little bit. I mean, the ice was obviously all in the bottom, is in the pumpkin itself, not necessarily in the axle tubes, although I'm sure there was some. But it was probably making its way over. So anyway, I flushed that with some diesel, some used diesel, before I put gear oil in it. So anyway, I got a drain pan underneath it. I'm hoping that the old Milwaukee gun will walk these U-bolt nuts off, because what we're going to have to do is unbolt the bags and undo the U-bolts if we can. If not, we'll have to torch them and buy new ones. I'd love to not have to buy new ones, because that's going to be about $200. So hopefully we can, and I know you're not supposed to reuse U-bolts, but I'm not going to worry. You can argue with me about that. But anyway, if we can get them off, we're going to walk those off. This one will probably come off great because it's soaked in freaking gear lube. The other side, who knows. But between heat and the gun, hopefully we can get those off, and then we can lift the frame up, lift that suspension assembly up off of the axle. Then I can grind a bevel, weld it, put it all back together. So, it's a few hours to fix it. I'd rather not have to do it, but it is what it is. That's the brakes. That's used parts. You win some, you lose some. Anyway, enough of that. So on the airline situation, so what I've got here is I completely cut off everything on the Peterbilt. The Peterbilt, strangely enough, by the way, only used it had a relay valve, obviously, but then it didn't use a quick release valve, one of these. It only used it on the service brake side, not on the parking brake side, which this probably isn't as big a deal anyway, to be honest with you. At any rate, though, the Ford had quick release valves in both circuits. As you remember in one of the first videos on the L9000, this is a brand new relay valve. So obviously we're going to use this one. The quick release valves are corroded and junk on this truck. The Peterbilt one wasn't much better. So I've got a list I've made of everything I'm going to replace on this once this frame has been blasted and painted and we're going to do final assembly. So we'll use these lines still, essentially. They're going to get cut back, but it's going to get new relay valves. This drop line coming off the, saying relay valves for quick release valves, Rob. It's going to get 2 new quick release valves, a couple fittings I need. This drop line going from the relay down to the service brake quick release valve, that's going to get replaced. So anyway, I've got a list out of my handy Tech-Tran book over here. I've got a list in my notes on my phone of everything I need, so that will be up to snuff. All good solid lines. These lines are going to end up being way too long, so when we mount this to the frame, I've also got some fittings I need to get this turned the way I want it and block mounted on the frame, and the fittings I need to get these lines to come in at the right point. We'll be able to get rid of these 2 unions. This was extended at some point. I don't know when. I think it was when they did the wrecker build. And the other thing is this. So I spent about an hour today researching and going through that book and trying to figure out what the heck this is. I've come to the conclusion that I think this is a shuttle valve. It was taking, basically, supply air from the service brakes. So this, previously there was a T coming in here into the relay valve. So that T allowed, this is supply air from your brake pedal, basically, from the treadle valve. Supply air came in, or signal air, I guess if you want to call it, came in, flowed into the relay, and then it also continued to flow through that T out to this line. This also took an input from the parking brake circuit. And originally, this orange line that feeds now over there fed into this, was unioned in. Then the outlet is the drop line that went down to the quick release valve for the parking brake circuit. So my understanding is that the way a shuttle valve works is it has a primary air supply, which would be this, and in the event of failure of that, there's a piston in here that would slide back and forth and would allow this to supply, which makes no sense. I don't know why you'd want to do it. I've not seen it. I mean, I don't know, like I have a ton of experience, but I've not seen this in most systems. So it's kind of like a tractor protection valve, I guess, something like that. We've already got one of those, up for the. So I'm getting rid of this. I've plumbed it out of the system, so it's we'll rob some fittings and add it to my fitting collection here. That I'm gonna take it out of a cardboard box. I got an extra toolbox over there. We're gonna have an air fitting toolbox now. But anyway, so essentially I have this plumbed right now. All I have to do is pull out the fittings. On the Peterbilt they use rubber or basically compression type fittings. So I'm gonna thread those. I've got one's broke off inside the brake can, I think, too, so that's gonna suck. See if we can easy out that one. Actually 2 of them, so we got to easy out those, and then change the fittings out, because we're using the nut and ferrule style like the Ford had, so we'll reuse these fittings that are in these cans, which should be the last thing we need off of this axle. So I'm going to get that done. So for now, these are all the wrong lengths and wrong everything. It's not going to sit right. We're basically going to zip tie that up here, because in a matter of a month or 2, we're going to be wanting to pull that back out and drape it over the frame and get it out of the way when this gets blasted. So I'm not going to take the time to do all that perfectly right now. So we'll zip tie that in, and then we'll get started on our airbag plumbing, and away she goes. Okay, so air brake system's plumbed back in. We had to cobble the crap out of this, boys. I'll probably, it's hanging pretty good. I don't know, went to zip tie. So we got the park brake feed just kind of hanging. This is all just kind of dangling here. I actually had to change the direction of the fittings and route the service brake feed underneath the drive shaft and the axle. Otherwise it was going to hit on the pinion yoke there. So again, this is temporary. I doubt we'd drive more than a few miles like this. So just to be able to test everything out and get her down the road. Based on all this, I tweaked my fitting list. I added a rubber drop line, so this park brake feed, let's get you guys out a little bit here. Oh, come on. This park brake feed can route down the frame, obviously, and then it's going to have a union fitting that'll adapt it to a rubber drop line. Then we'll have a 28-inch rubber drop line. These new quick release valves will be mounted on a bracket I'll build up on this stud, or it's possible I might repurpose that bracket right there, actually. Why not? It's already got the right holes drilled. So anyway, that drop will be the flex line. It'll go from, God darn it, we don't want to be dropping that too many times, I tell you what. At least it only bent the mounting bracket. That's the only part I don't really care about as much. We won't bump that anymore. And then we'll still use nylon air lines from that quick release valve down to the brake cans, because that part is rigid, obviously. The axle and the brake cans move together. But I've got new airline. I'm going to get new nuts and ferrules, change that can over to 90 so they come up instead of pointing out towards the middle. And, you know, basically all new brass. And the relay valve is already that way. It's got the rubber drop line, which I'm going to replace, but it takes it down from the relay valve down to the axle as well. So anyway, got that all figured out. Got a big long laundry list of fittings and airline I need to make that all be the way it needs to be. So problem solved. Temporarily anyway. I forgot to uncage the brakes. But so now I'm working on the bag setup. So I've kind of got this laid out. I've actually already plumbed the bags. Just simple compression fittings, 3/8 line. And we come up to my long length of line here. And again, this is all going to come off when this gets blasted, so we'll be pulling these lines off and taping off fittings and whatnot. But so this is how it's going to feed. So this is delivery valve number 1. This will be the fill valve. This solenoid valve, which is our dump, and then our 90 up will be the feed here, which goes back to the bags. So that way it's a unified system. The space between the valves is tied in with the bags essentially. So when you and these are both these valves are normally closed. So when we energize on the on the down side of the switch, we're going to actuate the dump valve, which is going to take that air pressure that's built up between the two and exhaust it out this exhaust port. This valve, when we flip the switch up, will energize this valve, allow air to fill into the bags. And then also in the middle here, we've got our adapter T that will take us to 1/8 inch line. That's our feed up to our gauge on the dashboard, so we know how much air we're putting in. So that's that. I'm going to get to... All right, guys. Well, I'm racing. It's the end of the day. I ran out of time. I had house projects to work on, but look at this. We got a boost gauge. It's not hooked up. We got an air gauge. It's not hooked up. We got one that is hooked up. And we got all these switches and these. So all these are pre-wired. I don't know what all of them do yet. They don't all have a purpose yet, but they're wired, grounded, lights, all that good shit. Boost gauge, everything's pre-loomed out through the firewall. Same with the front airbag system. That's both wires from the switch, as well as, so this switch, this gauge, this switch, this gauge, rear, steer. The rear is wired up, front is ran through the firewall. So I'm about to start this old girl. We'll see if we got brakes. My cobbled up airlines, my cobbled up wiring, because this is temporary. We're just butt splices. and we'll see if it works. You like my ground? Fancy. Let's see what happens. struggles. So the good news is the solenoids and the gauges and switches and all the entire airbag system for the rear works flawlessly. Works awesome. I can tell that without a load, without a trailer, we're going to be running about maybe 20 pounds. Not much air, but that part works awesome. What doesn't work awesome is that rear axle. Driver's side brake is, it's not locked, but it's tight. I can't get, even when I cage the brake, that slack adjuster is not pulling back. So I can get it to turn, but it's seized on one level or another. So there's something seized. There's something tight inside there. I don't know what it is. I made the mistake of pulling it out of the barn and then out into the snowy, slippery driveway, and I got stuck. I couldn't go down the driveway and I couldn't go up the driveway. So we had my wife steer, and old Nancy Hook the chain to the back. You can probably hear it running and hear the air dryer expelling air out there. It's been running for about an hour and a half. She runs great. I had it up through third gear in the driveway, moving nowhere, and the drive shaft feels like it spins nice and true, so that's the good news. So I got this in here. I turned the furnace back on. I went inside and I cooked some fried chicken and waffles, which was delicious, by the way, with like a spicy honey sauce on it. Ooh, it's on point. But I'm gonna get these damn headlights put in while I got it cleared out, and then I got just enough room. I think I can sneak Nancy out and get the L9000 back in here, and then I've got a disaster of a mess. We're gonna deal with that next weekend, and probably tear that driver's side brake apart, figure out what's going on, work on our trailer hitch, and maybe start dealing with the front air suspension. So that being said, I appreciate you guys watching. Hope you enjoyed this, and there's always something. That's the highlight to these kind of projects, right? It's always something. You boys have a good week.